Welcome to the Darkstream. I'm VoxDay, voxday.blogspot.com, and Infogalactic News. First of all, if you signed up, if you're one of the 684 people who signed up for the book club, make sure that you check your email. We sent out the email today to all the new subscribers with the links to the free copies of The Missionaries and There Will Be War Volume 1. And so you should have them already. Thanks to all of you who signed up. We're going to be sending out an email on Thursday. That'll be your first regular book club email. We'll be announcing some new stuff, a new book, new novel, as well as a couple new audiobooks and so forth. So, pretty happy about that. Glad you guys are able to participate. If you use Kindle, be sure to download Calibre. Calibre is an excellent program. Frankly, I recommend it to everyone anyhow. It allows you to easily convert files from one format to the other. So, the books we send out and the books we sell from the Castalia House site are all DRM-free EPUBs. Kindle uses either MOBI or AZW format, so Calibre will let you, transform that very easily. Takes 5 seconds. It's like 2 clicks. So anyhow, I highly recommend it. Got some good news. First of all, well, one thing I can't talk too much about, but we just signed a new contract for a new game that we're developing. So we'll be announcing that probably in 6 months or so, 6 to 9 months. I'll be talking more about that, but that's going to be a big deal. The other thing that I'm very excited about is we just signed the most important economist in the world, Steve Keen, and we're going to be releasing first an audiobook version of his Debunking Economics. So that will make it hopefully a little bit easier for the average person to understand. But more importantly, he is now tackling what he calls his magnum opus. And so, I don't know how long it's going to take him to write that. Obviously, it's not going to be out this year. But, it's another indication that Castalia is continuing to become more significant, intellectually stronger, and just demonstrating that we have a really, really good, strong stable of writers, and so both in fiction and nonfiction. There is not a recording of the Open Brainstorm. We don't generally release those. So he's not researching Bob Prechter. He's actually I think starting to use some of the socionomics in his work. So that's going to be particularly interesting because, what Keen is doing is he's working on debt-based economics, which is very significant. And so, and I suspect that he is going to, at some point in time, tie the social mood to debt in some way. Probably, as somebody pointed out, probably more on rate of debt increase or something like that, increase and decrease. Keen tends to look at the slopes and the rates rather than the actual than the quantities. But anyhow, it's potentially significant. So I'm very excited about that, and frankly, it's just a privilege to get to be involved with these guys. So I did some day trading. I was successful sometimes, unsuccessful sometimes. Pretty much worked out to not being worth bothering. It takes a certain mentality to do that. I'm probably too strategically minded to get involved in something that tactical. So anyhow, it's all coming along, and we're talking to some new authors as well, on the fiction side, but nothing to announce there. Somebody mentioned Throne of Bones. I hope you're enjoying that. If you haven't voted in the Dragon Awards, I would encourage you to do so. Some people have, I suggested that my A Sea of Skulls was probably the optimal candidate for the best fantasy novel last year. A lot of people seem to agree. It's shown up on a number of recommendation lists. So if you look on my blog, just do a search for Dragon Award 2017. You can see the various books that I'm recommending. And there's a couple other links to some of the recommendation lists that other people are making. So it's, I'm actually looking forward to getting back to that. I need to get SJW's Always Double Down out, and then I can get back to the extended edition of Sea of Skulls and so forth. There is a difference to me between a great book and a page turner. A page turner is exciting and holds your interest, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have any depth to it. A great book needs to not only absorb you, but also make an impression on you, leave you with something. Not necessarily teach you anything, but it should leave an impression on you. I can still remember very clearly, great books and stories that I've read. There's certain stories by, authors like, the great short story writers, the great short novelists that stick with you, that you remember. There's one story that I remember reading that affected me so greatly that it was a story about human nature, and it left me just sitting there staring at the ceiling for 45 minutes. So that's the kind of book that makes an impression on you. I think I don't know that we have. I don't think Castelli has published any great books yet, but we have published some very good ones. I'd have to look up the name of the story. I don't remember. It was by Guy de Maupassant, and it was about a boy who was unhappy having to take care of a horse, and it was just a really awful story, but very accurate to human nature, that demonstrated the pettiness and the narcissism of some forms of human evil. And you could recognize, even though, you or I might never have behaved in that particular way, you could recognize that line of thinking in yourself. You could recognize that just sort of petty bitterness that leads you to behave in an evil manner, even if it's a very petty and small way. I mean, there's just such, and then just the indifference of the world to it. The fact that nothing, other than the poor animal that suffered from the petty evil of the boy, and there was no difference. It made no difference to anyone, to the world. And so, it just, to me, really drove home the fact that evil is not necessarily dark and scary and exciting and dramatic. It can be incredibly banal. It can be incredibly petty and small. What's my IQ? It's a matter of public record, so no big deal. Depending on how you measure the standard deviation, it's between 148 and 151. So it's respectable. It wasn't even the second highest in the house of 4 guys I lived with after college. So that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand. I'm not at all impressed with high IQ or my own IQ, because I've known a number of people that are considerably higher, over a standard deviation higher. So yeah, that is the one thing that does occasionally lead people to underestimate me a little. I am literally retarded when it comes to spatial relations. My best friend used to enjoy giving me these this game. It's like a series of blocks, wooden blocks, and they have a card, and you're supposed to look at the card and make the block, make that shape out of the blocks. And I mean, I wasn't even inept. I was completely hopeless. I mean, he would just sit there and laugh his head off. It was like watching a monkey. He said it was like watching a monkey try to assemble a computer, because I had no idea. And so, anyhow, I'm actually okay with. I'm okay at Tetris. I'm not that bad at Tetris, but yeah, if you, we averaged it out once, and it's probably effectively. If it wasn't for that, some of the other stuff, I'd probably come out effectively more around 175 or so. I mean, when I'm interacting with some very, very smart people, those are the ones that I usually feel that we're kind of on the same level of logical analyses. But it is what it is. I mean, that's just. I don't pretend it's any higher than it is. It's just that you can't. Yeah, I think it was called Coco the horse. Yeah, I highly recommend reading it. In fact, if you like, I'm a big Guy de Maupassant fan. He's actually my favorite short story writer. If you want, in my book, The Altar of Hate, or on the blog, you can search for it. I wrote a short story in the mode. I wanted to try to write it in the style of Guy de Maupassant. I actually tried to do it with Lovecraft too. I don't think my Lovecraft story did not work. It is not convincingly Lovecraft. The Maupassant story was so successful that people recognized it immediately as being a Maupassant story, a Maupassant style story. So I was pretty happy with that. But anyhow, yeah, I mean, people are weird about intelligence. They're very strange. Let me see that story. Hang on a second. If you look, here's the kind of creepy thing about that story. The thing that was kind of creepy about that story. Anyhow, just do a search for it. You'll find it. But what was crazy about the story that I wrote was that only a few days after I wrote it, the town in Italy that I set it in was completely wiped out by an earthquake and landslide. It really doesn't exist anymore. So that was a little bit creepy. But But I think it's a good story. I was very pleased with it. I think it's probably the best thing I've ever written, to be honest with you. But anyhow, to get back to what we were talking about before, people are strange about intelligence in a way that they're just not strange about height or weight. I mean, it's not like, parents are sometimes a little bit weird. They're like, they don't want to tell their kids how intelligent they are. Believe me, the child knows. There is a fundamental difference between the kind of people in Pakistan who don't have the brains to not smoke cigarettes around gasoline fumes, and those who know better. And so it's also, it's also ridiculous when it comes to things like school and that sort of thing. The Deported, that's right, thank you. If you want to read that story, look up the story called The Deported. And so, I think now part of it is that because the left has tried to create this sense of elitism and credentialism that claims that they have the right to rule because they are smarter. But I can tell you that's not the case. I mean, I may be smarter than the vast majority of people, but believe me, you do not want me to pack your car. We had to pack up some stuff. We were moving some stuff out of a building this weekend, and my wife and I went up. She always packs the car, always packs everything, because I remember we had this Suburban and I would pack them up, and then she would come out and I'd say, oh, it's all full, and she would move two things and suddenly there's twice as much space. So she was cracking up because I was taking stuff out to the dump and she was packing up things. And anyhow, I'd gone down to the basement and dragged up this giant mattress, thinking, okay, I'll just I'll make a run to the dump, take this. Anyhow, a little bit later, she comes outside and says, "What the hell is this? What the hell is this giant mattress doing here?" And I said, "Yeah, I kind of put it there." And she said, "You dragged that up all the way from the basement yourself?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "And you thought that was going to fit in the car?" I said, "Well, yeah. I wouldn't have dragged it up here if I hadn't intended to do something with it." And she sort of looked at me very sympathetically and said, "It's a good thing you're so cute." So, and then promptly walked back in, clearly reconsidering all of her life choices. You can hardly blame her. So this is why I'm not allowed to pack the car. But that's just the way it is. I mean, some people can dunk a basketball. Some people can spot a logical error just by glancing at a page of text. Some people can look at two objects and realize that one is not going to fit in the other. I am clearly not somebody in that latter category. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't make you any less a child of God. It doesn't make you any less valuable a human being, and so forth. But I mean, the reality is equality is bullshit. I mean, if you're going to talk about equality, you might as well talk about unicorns or leprechauns or any other non-existent utopian thing. There is no form of equality that exists in the world. There's no such thing as spiritual equality. There's no such thing as legal equality. There is no such thing as material equality, sexual equality. But I understand people talk about equality as in treatment under law. It does not exist. There is no equality under law. Okay? If some old man goes and axe murders somebody versus some pretty 18-year-old girl going and doing exactly the same thing, they won't be punished the same. They will not face equal treatment under the law. And actually, we're not all equally human. That's another interesting thing. What is humanity? Tell me what human is. What is the human species properly? What's the scientific term? Anyone? I'll give you a hint. It starts with homo. There we go. Homo sapiens sapiens. Right? So are we all equally Homo sapiens sapiens? Give it a heart if you think the answer is yes. Are we all Homo sapiens sapiens? Are we all human? That's incorrect. We're not. By the genetic criteria. Homo sapiens sapiens, the only people who are pure Homo sapiens sapiens are sub-Saharan Africans. Europeans are have up to 5% Homo neanderthalis genes. Asians also have a mix of something called Homo denisova. And there's also a fourth Homo something or other that they have, I don't know if they've even named it. There's Homo floresiensis, which I don't believe anybody actually has. And there's also, if I recall correctly, a fourth Homo something or other race. And so, but that's my point. Is that we are not all equally anything. Not even in the spiritual sense. Those of you who are Christians might say, "Oh, we are all equal in that sense." That's not true. Even if you're not a Calvinist, you have to recognize, in addition to the wheat and the chaff, which could be based on free will. Even in addition to that, there's what they call the vessels created for destruction. If you happen to be a vessel created for destruction, and I'm not a Calvinist, so I'm not saying that everything is predestined and so forth. But even if most people have genuinely free will, not everyone does. Some people are created for a purpose of destruction. So, but again, that's the point. Equality does not exist in any capacity. None whatsoever. And so, the problem is that we currently have this ideology of equality, which means it is fundamentally false. So we have an entire society, arguably an entire civilization, that is built upon false foundations. And no society built on false foundations is going to survive very long. And this is the problem that I have with the alt-right. I tend to like a lot of the people in the alt-right. I think they tend to be decent human beings. Well, equality is an ideal. If you want to read more about equality, I got a book for you. Um, it is written by the brilliant military historian Martin Van Creveld. It's called Equality, the Impossible Quest. And you can see it's got that famous painting of the women pouring the water into a jar with holes in the bottom. It's in audiobook format too. It's an excellent book, and it's basically the history of equality. He goes into incredible detail, goes all the way back to the beginning of the beginning, and traces the concept to the original philosophers who first started bringing it up, and then to the ideologues who turned it into a political ideology and all that sort of thing. And he traces the failures of it. So, no, you're wrong. The alt-right is extremely concerned with image. They are terrified. They basically don't want to be racist, and they don't want to be anti-equalitarian, and they really don't want to be ethno-nationalist. They're terrified of the science. They're terrified of the truth. And this is what you see over and over and over and over again in these false ideologies. They turn away from the truth because it's too uncomfortable. It frightens them. And that's why what's the significance of the image on the cover? The women are pouring water into, it's an impossible quest. They're pouring water into a jar that has holes in it. So the alt-right is going to learn. They cannot deny it. Reality is going to push them to the alt-right. Is there any possible way Spencer's a CIA agent? I wouldn't know, but I would very much doubt it. Spencer is somebody whose whole strategy depends upon clowning for the media. That's what he does. It's not a surprise. It is something that it's his intentional strategy. Clown for the media, get support, start a think tank. That's what he has openly said he wants to do. I personally think that that's a strategy from the 80s, and it's outdated. I don't think he's done a good job at all. I think he's done an absolutely horrific job. I think that, in general, I think his time has largely passed, and I think he knows it, because that's why he's constantly trying to jump in front of the media cameras. I don't understand what you mean. Do you have a choice when you're cornered? No, it's not all on Spencer. Plenty of people have made some no, but Spencer didn't define the alt-right. He had nothing to do with it. Paul Gottfried did. And so I like Spencer too. I like him as an individual. I think he's courageous. But he has no ability to, he doesn't have the ability to do what he wants to do. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Part of the problem is that he and some of the people who like to talk him up are falling into the trap that the media is setting for them. The reason, haven't you guys ever noticed that the media is constantly trying to create leaders? They've tried to do it to Milo. They've tried to do it to Mike Cernovich. They've tried to do it to me. They've tried to do it to Spencer. Now notice something interesting. How did everybody who wasn't Spencer, of the people that I mentioned, how did all of us react? We absolutely denied any leadership of the alt-right. Spencer wanted to claim it. Why? Because he was not part of Gamergate. He did not understand. Yeah, Greg Johnson is more or less following the same flawed strategy. That's one reason why he and Spencer don't get along, is because they're basically rivals for the same space. They don't understand that it's a poison chalice, and that should be the very last thing that you should want or seek. You know, I absolutely refuse any sort of leadership of any kind in any political movement. I'm not interested in political movements. I'm interested in political philosophy. So, no, you guys are just foolish. The Nazi salute is utterly stupid. You might as well put on powdered wigs. I mean, the stuff that you're doing with the whole, like, trying to reclaim Hitler and Nazism and all that sort of thing is every bit as dumb as the Tea Party. Why don't you do, ooh, party like it's 1776 and put on a tricorn hat? It's fucking retarded. It has absolutely nothing relevant to anything whatsoever, and trying to babble on about a dead and failed movement for Teutonic supremacy is totally ridiculous. Look, if they actually, no, babble on, not Babylon, prattle on, if you prefer. But somebody just said, oh, but his Twitter has increased 200%. So what? If Twitter was concerned, what does Twitter do when they're concerned about how much influence you're getting? They take it away. If Spencer was actually anything significant, Twitter would have already taken his account away. That's what they do. You know? But all this stuff, it doesn't matter. What matters is the social trends. The social trends are going to bring people to the fore. They're going to bring people to the fore, and it doesn't matter who the leader is. I don't subscribe to great man theory. I don't think it matters. And so, Spencer should do largely what he's doing. He should simply be more, he should simply stop trying to leap in front of the cameras every time somebody gets a little bit of attention somewhere. Just do your own thing. Focus on your objectives. Focus on your objectives, whatever they are, and make them happen. That's all you got to do. If you want to get elected to Congress, figure out how to get yourself elected to Congress. If you want to publish a book, write it. If you want to build up a large social media following, well, you probably shouldn't do it on a place where the people who control the system are opposed to you. I reached out to him. I had him on Brainstorm once. So, yeah, the alt-right is growing. More than the alt-right growing, the alt-right is inevitable. Why? Because conservatism has failed. Progressivism has failed. Liberalism has failed. Communism has failed. Nazism has failed. Fascism has failed. Western democracy has more or less failed. I should say Western representative democracy has demonstrated its illegitimacy and bankruptcy. It has not yet failed, but it's in the process. Civic nationalism has failed. Multiculturalism has failed. Globalism has demonstrated its intellectual bankruptcy and its discivic and decivilizational nature, and is in the process of failing. What does that leave? It leaves the alt-right. Alt-right and limited democracy are compatible, but you know, again, that's a little bit outside my concern. I am an advocate for direct democracy, like they have in state referendums, like they have in Switzerland. Direct democracy is much better than representative democracy because it is much less easily corrupted. So, I'm really not interested in talking anymore about Richard Spencer, so you need to stop asking me about him. How am I sure that globalism will fail? Because of the necessary inconsistencies and structural incoherencies involved. Direct democracy has not been horrible for California. Direct democracy has been blocked in California. You know, the problems that California is having are mostly because the people's referendums were overturned by judges. You know, it's kind of funny because people mindlessly repeat the concerns of the Founding Fathers about mob rule when they had a strictly limited franchise. But they don't realize that the direct democracy would be much, much, much better. Because at least then, people would be forced to immediately confront the error of their ways, and they would have the ability to change direction as a result. If you want to read about just read Bob Proctor's book, Socionomics. Do I think there will be a new world order before Christ returns? I would think so. But I don't think that this current effort to build the new world order is going to succeed. I think that this one is going to collapse like the previous attempts. You know, it's going to collapse into, you know, global economic depression and war. So, anyhow, but back to the question. Somebody asked me if you bought a Castelia House book and you sign up and you got the email and you received the 2 free books. Yes, you are part of the Castelia Book Club. You will be receiving an email with the new release on Thursday. On that note, I should get going. So have a good evening. Sorry for the wildly off-topic rambling, but I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Have a good evening.